There we go. I think that we are now live. In fact, I think I may have been live for 10 seconds or so, just mindlessly staring at the camera. I'm sitting inside Alan at the moment, as you can see, because outside, although blue sunny skies is always a good thing, it's quite contrasty, so it's quite hard to actually get a good picture out there. But I promise we will head outside of Alan to take a look and to answer some questions later on. And also I will try, because this is my first live broadcast, I'll try not to press the wrong button at the wrong time. Hopefully you can all hear me, because I've set up a microphone that will, I hope, if it's a bit windy outside, mean that you can hear me reasonably well. So what I'm going to try and do is answer some questions as they are coming in as we go along. I've also got some questions which have already been asked of me, which have come in via email or via DM and via Twitter and that sort of thing. So I'll make sure that I can answer as many as I possibly can. But I think what I'll do before we even get going is give you a very, very brief tour of Inside Alan, because I know that in some of my episodes I'm sort of focusing on one sort of tiny corner of the boat or one part of the boat outside, and sometimes you can't really get a good sense of what's what, and sometimes seeing Alan in the hole is a good thing. Yeah, that's reasonable. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stand up. You don't have to look at me all the time, so I will flick this round that way. Okay, so we're looking towards the bow, and I'm just going to very quickly walk you around from this corner. Here we have one of the hatches. I've been putting up loads of these nets, as you can tell. Been getting a little bit net crazy. The areas that I'm leaving blank are for other things. For instance, this area is where someone who is doing their business will not want to have a net behind them. So I'm leaving some areas. There'll be loads of tech going up here, a few nets here. I have not finalized all the positions yet. To the left, this is the electrics setup, which I'm sure most of you will be quite familiar with. Down there without the top on is the current battery bank, which is Carlos is the battery that cranks the engine right now. And then there are the two that run the 24-volt system. There will eventually be 5 batteries, but I've just got those 3 at the moment. Here's all the racking. Down here, fuel tank, some spare fuel. This is where all the long-range fuel tanks will end up, but right now it's just a tool storage, really. Inside here, we have just basic storage, which I put in. In fact, my teammate and I put in, getting on for 18 months, 2 years ago now. Wow. So they're quite useful. Coming to the bow, here is a water tank. Never really mentioned this before, but there will be an episode on water, I'm sure, at some point. Here's the anchor and chain and rope. There's going to be a system that goes up here at some point, which will give me a proper anchor assembly. Here is that special drainy thing which you saw in the last episode. And now I'm going to try and not grow up myself on this power line. On this side, strangely enough, it looks roughly similar. So we've got more racking and we've got more storage, and then we come back towards the stern again. The engine, I have got the cover which I can take off at the end to talk to you about the engine if any questions come in about it. But at the moment I do have the top on the engine cowling because I use it as a table. Let's just quickly pop outside and I'll take us up onto the deck without falling off. Here we have 2 solar panels which have gone up, some storage, and if I walk up here, you'll see the view down across the bow. If it is a bit windy, you might find it a bit hard to hear me right now, but hopefully the microphone's doing a reasonable job. And then back towards the stern again. I've still got this temporary all-round light, which I need to replace with a proper one at some point, but the mast I need to permanently erect at some point. Down here, that's the electrics entry point, which I'm kind of hiding at the moment because it's a right mess, but I will be, particularly when these solar panels get rigged up, I will be connecting all that through so that all the power goes down through that entry point into the boat. There's Alan. Excellent. Right, let's head back down again, and then I will switch on the chat function. Hopefully I can answer some of your questions. And if I do need to go around the boat, hold on, let me bring it around again. Cool. If I do need to go around the boat to show you something, then I can. Right, so if I switch on the questions, I should be able to, I hope. All I'm seeing at the moment is, this just shows you that I've not done this before. Haha. Right, excellent. That's that. I think I've sorted that now, ish. What I'm going to do is start answering some questions which have come in from before. And the first one is, where are the big fuel tanks that the racking is for? That's a very good question. So the original idea was to use the large racking, which takes up, let's face it, a large amount of the inside of Alan, for long-range bladders, so not solid fuel tanks. And that's because we wanted to have a capacity of up to, and in fact I think just over 2,000 litres, so that Alan could be completely self-sufficient for a very, very long journey on his original plan going up to the Arctic, which of course was all stymied by COVID. So this is why Alan's in his sort of second lease of life now. The fuel tanks, at the time we were sponsored by a couple of companies, and they had supplied us with a number of them. But when the expedition was cancelled because of COVID, different parts of my expedition team went off with certain items. I couldn't take everything, and so we decided that they would take some of these. Some of the tanks. I actually only have one, and it's currently being stored carefully in my warehouse elsewhere, so I don't have that with me right now. I'm just using that area now for storage. Second question is Alan insulated? Yes, he is. So most of this area, all the way up there, and most of the main, let's call them walls, I know people will get upset about that, they're all full of closed cell foam that would have gone in when the boat was manufactured. So all of this, behind all of here, is lots and lots of foam. Now, if you look at the difference between inside and out, you can see there's a reasonable thickness there of foam. Now, there are certain areas that were not insulated, and in particular we're talking about around the driving console area and particularly the entire stern wall. Now, that is why I've gone in with this sort of Apollo 11 style insulation, which is pretty thick, about that thick, and it does an excellent job. I've been finding over the last few days it's actually been quite cold here. We had a bit of a heat wave, and now it's got cold again. In fact, we had some snow yesterday. But I found that when pumping a little bit of heat into here, at the moment it's electric heat, but I will be getting some diesel heat at some point. All it needs is a little spurt every now and again to get the temperature back up to normal, and then the boat itself holds in temperature really nicely. So insulation is going pretty well. There are no real areas I need to pay attention to apart from the actual hatches in the windows. I'm planning a bit of a double glazing extravaganza at some point, so I'll be going into polycarbonates and working out what's the best option, how to evacuate the void so that there's no condensation. That'll be a whole big job. What about radar, marine radio, and marine transponders? Right. I was actually very kindly gifted an AIS unit by one of Alan's fans, and so that's currently being stored carefully somewhere back in London. And when I get round to putting that all together, attaching the radio, which I'm still working out exactly which radio I'm going to get, that will all be a big job. I suspect probably towards the end of this summer, because I've got some big summer jobs I need to do. There are some more questions coming up. How many team members will Alan comfortably hold? So theoretically, don't know if you can see there, theoretically, it still says 68 people, but let's face it, no one believes that. The original seating plan was actually that all of these dark spots here, so so these dark spots here, that was going to be a place where each rescued person's arse was going to go, and so everyone knew when they were escaping either from a ship or from a rig, everyone had to come in here and sit themselves down on all these little black spots. And there were apparently originally 68 of them all the way through. There was seating through the middle section as well. I wouldn't really want to be one of those. The plan is for there to be space for 3, maybe 4 people to comfortably live on board here with removable temporary sleeping platforms. I think I very briefly mentioned the sleeping platform before. There's not going to be a separate cabin for sleeping in, although I am planning to do a divider about halfway down so that one area is warmer than the other, one area is a working area, one area is a living area, but there won't be cabins as such. I'm going to see if I can try and get, I know that there are some more questions that have been pinging up, and I'm just trying to make sure I can see them. Otherwise, you may have to ask them again. Until I see any more pop up, I'm going to answer another question from the sheet. I thought they would all come up in a big list. Where's the anchor? I've showed you the anchor. I should have mentioned that was a question that was asked earlier. Do I have auto helm? No. So right now, let me turn the camera around. Right now, down in there, we have the current helming system, which runs through control cables down there, all the way up here to the steering wheel. Now, at some point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to designate this area here to an area where I'm going to install an auto helm, and that means that then I can use the assembly down there, extend it, and I can have it this neatly out the way back here. Also, there is an emergency. In fact, the sign is still there. The emergency tiller can be used through that little hole there, and so if the whole thing goes to pot, you can stick a pole on the end of that and actually steer manually. So that's a good question. Is condensation an issue? It was when I first got Alan. Round here in the morning, particularly in the winter time, it was soaking wet. There was mildew, there was all sorts of problems. Inside this area, never. This area was always fine because it's all really well insulated. And again, around the bow area, there were all sorts of drips that went down into the bilge down there. Not so much anymore. I don't really notice any apart from on the windows now. And I've told you that that's probably going to be a big job to double glaze those, because otherwise what you don't want is lots of heat being lost through those during the winter time, but also it will make visibility a big issue. Where is Alan going and when? I think that was actually a question that pinged up on the screen. Let me bring it back around to me again. Yeah, so I think someone actually asked me that live a second ago as well. Where is Alan going and when? So there was an episode on Alan's original plan, and that was cancelled because of COVID, I mentioned. He's still going to go to the Arctic. I'm not you may have noticed I'm not a sailor or a professional yachtsman or a professional powerboater. I see Alan as a rather convoluted method of getting to the Arctic sea ice and to doing big expeditions up in the high Arctic and potentially even down south, but that's a topic for another time. And I still want him to do that. And I don't know exactly how it's going to happen at the moment. I need to work out funding and teams and that sort of thing. But my plan is to, I think, probably not this summer, there won't be time, and I've still got all sorts of work to do, particularly on the hull of Alan. I've got to do the cooling system and everything. But probably the summer after, I will probably start taking Alan up to the Arctic, probably via Scandinavia, as opposed to going across to North America, because all the freighting costs are much, much higher getting over from here in Europe over to Canada. A lot of the quotes that we were getting for freighting back on the last project, it was tens of thousands of dollars just to do basic moves. Whereas going up through Scandinavia will be far better, and it means I can actually film the journey. It would be quite exciting. And then maybe stationing him up in Svalbard. That's a possibility, but I'm not absolutely certain about that yet. Have I decided how much more ballast you're going to need and where it's going to be placed? Good question. At the moment, there is a load of ballast actually just sat there waiting to be deployed. And under those batteries, there's a huge amount more. There's about 200-300 kilograms altogether under there. And actually underneath the hull itself, I've got a whole load of it that's just sitting there in storage. So yeah, I will put that in. Some of it will go underneath that racking floor. I'm also going to add some ballast around the keel. I'm going to add some into the section down there around the prop guard, which is going to be my big summer job. So I'm hoping be nice to get another ton. I'm not going to go much more than that because there's a limit to how much just putting extra weight is going to help. At some point, I'm going to have to accept that Alan's hull is Alan's hull. And I do have an anti-rolling device, which I'm planning and I'm sort of sketching out at the moment, which can be deployed and then undeployed, depending on whether I'm around ice or whether I'm on the high seas. So that's an idea that I might be able to do that this year. That'll be a good plan. That boat's seen as much water as my motorcycle. Probably. Where is I don't know when? I think I've answered that one now. Will you have cabins? No, I won't have cabins. The sleeping area, as I said, is going to be basically along these side areas and around the bow as well. But I'm hoping around this area across here there'll be a divider and we can actually segregate two parts of the boat, which I think will make life a great deal easier. Let's flip this around again. Where do I cook? Right, so I'm actually designating this area here is where the diesel reflex stove is going to go, and it's going to be chimneyed up through through the deckhead there. That's going to be where we'll be able to cook, because it's a reflex with a cooking surface on top, which you can put a pan directly onto. But at the moment, my temporary solution is these. These are actually quite ingenious. I think truckers came up with them quite a long time ago. People have them in the cabs of their trucks, and it plugs in either AC or DC. I think there's a band name in there somewhere, and it means that you can put food in here. It doesn't really cook it, but it just warms it up, and like 20-30 minutes later you've got a hot meal. So I quite like this. It's a bit plasticky, and I'm not sure it would last much of a beating, but yeah, it's I'm quite happy with it. So it means that when I'm just here for a couple of days, I use that when I don't need to cook properly. Anyway, that's that. There was another question that came in that I was slightly confused about, but I think it was basically about power generation, because I've got the solar panels that are going on at the moment, and I'm going to have a wind turbine as well. I'll answer the quick, how about going to the loo? There it is. There's an entire episode dedicated to that. I think he was saying that I could drag something behind the boat to generate electricity by essentially having a little hydro turbine. You can get hydro turbines, you can put them in rivers and in the sea and all sorts of things, but I suspect it will cause a huge amount of drag, will get broken. If it hits ice, it will get broken. So I'm not really planning to do that, I'm afraid. They are the ones that are on my sheet. I can now, as they ping up, I can start answering some more questions. Do I have a video about a final design or a plan on some software? No, I've not really done a really intense CAD design, largely because at the moment from the beginning, I wasn't just winging it, but I was essentially doing the basic work that didn't really need drawings and designs. For the big job that's going to happen this summer, where I'm going to be building up the hull around the prop guard and the sort of the skeg that leads to the prop, that's going to need some more work done to it, and there are some very specific angles that it needs to be built at, and so that will probably require some actual on paper design work or on screen design work. So yes and no. I've been mostly just doing things by eye so far, and that's worked out fine. You may be surprised or you may not be surprised. There was a diagram for the electrics board, which I'm still in the process of collecting all the little all the families of cables together so that they look neater and they're easier to deal with, and then I'm labelling them all. But there was a design behind that, although I'm sort of adding to it as time goes on, which is always the way, isn't it? Are there any more questions? I know that there are some questions that would have been buried in the list. I didn't see as they were going past. I thought they would come up in a nice long list for me to answer. Let's see if I can bring one up. Oh, there we are. Will I get internet for Alan for email? Yes, I will. So at the moment on expeditions, I tend to use satellite phones. So when I'm up in the high Arctic, you can only really use Iridium. I know that Starlink is trying to move into a true global coverage, but at the moment I think they have priorities elsewhere. Doing things up on the Arctic Ocean isn't Elon Musk's main priority. So Starlink will be a possibility in the future, but at the moment Iridium is the satellite network for reasonable quality, reasonable speed internet. So I use those on small handheld devices. Also, you can get proper vessel or vehicle mounted ones, which cost vast amounts of money. We did actually have a deal with them for the big expedition, but of course, because there's now no big documentary happening at the moment about Alan, those offers are now off the table, but I might be able to get that thing going again, because being able to have connectivity on Alan beyond what's self-fundable would be amazing. So at the moment it's limited sort of low bandwidth SMSs, emails, maybe the odd photo, but to be able to actually stream things, to do high bandwidth work, I'm quite keen to try and get. I think it's called the Certus L band service from Iridium, and that can give you, I think, 250, 500 kilobytes a second. I think some of them are now even faster than that. How much fresh water will I be able to carry, and where is it stored? I can answer that. I quickly showed you the water tank at the beginning. So this is, I think, a 110 litre vertical tank, and I've not put the pump in or really done anything with it since it was bought. It's just been sitting there the entire time, and so that will be the freshwater tank. When we were going to be on the expedition, we were going to be around sea ice for a good period of it. And on sea ice, you want to make sure that you avoid eating it because it's full of salt. But on top, if you don't take the entire scoop, if you take the scoop of snow off the top, you can get some nice fresh water. So instead of having to use the water maker all the time, we were going to be able to melt snow, bring it in sacks, and then melt it in here, and then we'll be able to fill up that tank. So that's if you're on a long-term expedition, ice locked, you'll be able to use snow from outside. But that'll also be a water maker. I think there was another question. Alan is a life raft. No, Alan is actually a lifeboat. A life raft is quite different to a lifeboat. Thanks, whoever that was. Do I have a good idea yet on the hourly fuel rate? On the sea trials, both sets of sea trials, I double checked. We were looking at the optimum revs. We were looking at about 1.8 litres an hour, and we were cruising at anywhere between 5 and 7 knots, which is a lot better than I actually thought it was going to be. That will change with a different I'd say payload, but when Alan's fully laden for the stores and everything, then quite unsurprisingly, it'll affect both sea handling, fuel economy, all sorts of things. But 1.8 litres an hour at the moment is what we were working on. At the moment, it really is just. At the moment, it is just a 120 litre plastic tank down there. I like the plastic tank. I know it's sort of a cheap option compared to what you can buy these days, but I like the fact that it's semi-translucent, so you can see how much fuel there is in there, which is quite useful. I think someone just asked me, how fast does Alan go? If there's no following wind and we're on more or less slack water, I think we were looking at about 6.5 knots, sometimes 7. It's not a fast boat. How many backups upon backups will we have? You have mission critical. I think that might have been a joke, but I'm going to answer it as if it was a serious question. You have mission critical gear, so communications, survival gear, obviously spare food, medical gear. Of that, you'll probably want more than just one of. Things break, you need redundancy. But other than that, I've got reasonably good on expeditions of actually making do with things. On my first big ski expedition, actually I had a ski snap in half, which is unfortunate when you're skiing, and we managed to tie that back together, and the ski managed another 400 miles. For food, fish, dried or canned, MRE. I'm not eating MREs. We've all tried MREs, they're disgusting. No, so on board here, it'll be what can pack down really easily. So, for instance, you can get a huge amount of spaghetti into there. So that is the optimum pasta shape because there's not much air around it. So there are all sorts of different foods that we will use as our staples. Yeah, rice, spaghetti, that sort of thing. And then we can use the stove to make exciting things from that. Is there going to be a life raft on the lifeboat? Well, at least you're calling Alan a lifeboat now, because I think he was a bit offended by being called a life raft. Yeah, again, when the original expedition was being planned, we actually had a Valleys life raft. Luckily, I didn't end up with it because actually they expire and they have to be serviced, and that costs quite a lot of money. But yes, probably mounted on the stern, there will be either a canister or a Valleys life raft. There was a splurge of questions a second ago. It's annoying that I can't bring them back up again. And many... Oh, yes, there was a question about is Alan going to stay orange? So Alan was painted last summer. Not the same orange that he always was originally, but I'll just go back outside. So... that sort of orange, which is it's a few shades different on the RAL scale. I think he's RAL 2010, I think. I think originally lifeboats are 2005. Anyway, I wanted to keep Alan orange for a number of reasons. I'm going to move somewhere slightly different now, just for sake of difference and originality. The original plan was to keep Alan orange because the other options are either you go for a camouflage colour, which for safety reasons is a bit daft, or you go yellow. Someone's already done that, and also I've seen that some in-commission lifeboats are also yellow, so you're not really differentiating from in-commission and out-of-commission lifeboats by doing that. Or there's things like, I guess you could do like lime green or something like that, and I mean, Alan is not a lime green boat, so Alan is going to stay orange. Although you'll see that his underside is now epoxy black, because that's the only colour it came in. There's some questions about me going on expeditions with skis and stuff. I'll try and stay on Alan for now, if that's all right. And now we're being asked about crisps. Well, at least you're saying crisps, not chips, because then we'll just end up with a really, really confusing transatlantic translation thing. I'm going to quickly go up onto, do I have to register and get insurance for Alan? Very good question. In the UK, you do have to register small boats. If I make sure I don't fall off, that's probably my data protection blown, but there's Alan's registration number. You don't actually have to insure by law. Let me go back in again because it's quite windy, otherwise you won't be able to hear me outside. You don't have to insure unless you're on inland waterways, and then you do, I think, at least for third party, in case you bash into someone. And then when you're offshore, I've looked into offshore insurance for Alan, and it's a bit of a nightmare. You can go to Lloyd's of London and get a quote, I suppose, but I think the premiums will start being insanely high. I'd like to get Alan insured for the basics in case Alan causes any mischief, bangs into something or someone or whatever. But I suspect insuring Alan for his value will be a hiding to nothing. I think for some things in life you just got to sort of self-insure. And if you end up with actually losing the boat entirely, like a fire, or you can't really sink Alan, you can only sort of, even if you chopped him in half, both halves would carry on floating, but they wouldn't be particularly useful halves. But you would, if you actually lost Alan entirely, then I think you just have to put that down to experience, which would be pretty heartbreaking, because the thousands of hours I've now worked on this thing, that would be rather sad. So Alan needs to stay alive. Let's see if did I miss any more questions? If not, we're coming up towards half an hour. So what I'm going to do is when the questions start going a bit light, or when you guys start just flinging abuse at me, I'll probably go outside and just show you the outside of Alan. Is Alan comfortable? I'm not going to lie. Right now, I haven't really done much around comfort. Everything's been quite practical right now. So for sleeping on, I've just got sleeping bag at the moment and sleeping pads and stuff. But all the way around this seating area, we're going to have Velcro on pads, which means that during a working day, or if you're working around here in the evening, which is going to be sort of like the science area and packing and sorting things around, we will have more comfortable arrangements. So yeah, if you were asking about how comfortable Alan is at sea, he pitches really predictably and actually quite comfortable into going into waves head on. He does roll. Lifeboats roll. They're known as vomit rockets. I mean, that's just life. I'm going to try and do something about the rolling using. I'm not going to give you too many details yet, but a device that can be fixed to and then removed from Alan, depending on whether there's any ice around or not. And so there will hopefully be a way of avoiding the rolling. That's at the moment, I would say, quite pronounced when we're out on the water. It doesn't take much of a wash from a ship going by to make Alan roll quite a bit. I think there was another question about fuel efficiency. So yeah, it was about 1.8 litres an hour we were consuming at what we found was a sweet spot of fuel economy. So it was much better than the engine spec says on the internet. I think they were a little bit pessimistic about that. But that said, Alan is not anywhere near fully laden, and we've not really taken Alan into really demanding seas yet, and that will obviously have quite a big effect. We will see if there are any more questions. If there are any more, I will try and answer them on the fly. But what I'll do is now is I'll, have I considered changing the, yeah, so I was considering getting a brand new prop. That was a question about whether the propeller's the best one at the moment. At the moment, I think I'm going to stick with it. It's a nice bronze one, and I've chatted to some people who actually understand props a lot more than I do, and they've said that the pitch and the number of blades, I could increase the number of blades, and I could, but the pitch at the moment is actually quite good for thrust at low speed, which is really what we're after. And so I'm going to probably stay with it at the moment. They're very expensive, and I would always keep the one I've got here as a spare, because of course they can get damaged. But I think at the moment I'm going to hold station on that, because we found that his thrust, even into quite a tide, is encouraging. I've heard a lot of lifeboat owners saying that they really struggle with in currents and with tides because of a lack of thrust. But a lot of these boats only have 15, 20 horsepower engines. We've got when it was new and in top health, getting up to 50 horsepower, which I know is still not a huge amount, but with a well paired propeller. Has actually got quite a lot of thrust in a forward direction. Going astern is very, very tricky. Install a small cabin fan for cross ventilation. You are either quite observant or an absolute genius. There is a square duct that goes along there, which is not actually joined up to anything yet, and that is going to be for moving air through the cabin, either in one direction or the other. Whether I need to extract, for instance, steam or something like that, or whether I want to inject air from the outside. I'm also thinking about having some this sort of dead area up the top. I'm thinking about possibly putting some fans in there that will move air, again, in both directions, and depending on whether I want to move warm air from where the stove will be over there in this direction, or vice versa, that will be quite a good use of that sort of central area, because all there is right there at the moment is a light. Right, I am now going to go outside. I think it's still quite sunny, so it may be tricky to see, but let's jump outside. I'm going to try and avoid getting other people's boats in the picture, because what I don't want to do is encroach on people's privacy, because this is obviously a boatyard where people store their boats. And hello, Wyoming. Right, so, whoever was mentioning a while back that I should probably put some ends on here so that people can't slide off the end. Done that, and that's going to be in one of the episodes. They're not color coded yet. What happens if if the hatches freeze over? Are we able to open them when they are cold? Good thing about this is that here there's no insulation there, and these are insulated, so actually this shouldn't freeze up. If we have problems with these hinges, then we'll probably have to go out the top hatch and then come outside and thwack away any ice. We go around here. It's a nice day, isn't it? That's very artistic, lovely. Less artistic down here. This is where, in fact, this may interest you. This is actually the old engine cowling, which I'm just keeping as spare fiberglass now. And it's absolutely enormous, far too big, but it's still got all of these black marks on where people would have even been asked to sit on the engine cowling so they can get the maximum capacity. And then this was the central control system, where a load of those cables went up into up onto the deck. This is my now quite storm damaged storage unit. And here is Alan's starboard side, which is remarkably rather like the port side, but the other way around. Yes, you're quite right. If you're an oil worker and you're trying to get 68 people in here, I hope everyone's been on a diet, because 68 people in there is not a lot of fun. So I've kept these sort of for old time's sake, I suppose, but also I kept this, which is the original chalk, which I've now glossed over to protect it. That's the original markings that our boat broker, oddly called Alan, who Alan may or may not be named after, and that's what he wrote on Alan when he put him aside for purchase. So I thought I would keep that there as a bit of Alan's history. And there's the stern. There's quite a lot of work to do on the stern. I've got to put some more grab handles on and various other things. I am now going to retreat back into Alan again. In we go. I've managed to do that without falling off the ladder. And you poor lot, you have to look at me again. Right, I think we're possibly getting low on questions now. Oh, how will I deal with ice build-up on top? We'll just have to keep on top of that. When we're at sea, and if there are cold temperatures, the ice is forming, but we're still underway, we're just going to have to manually sort that out in the way that most people have to when they're at sea in Arctic conditions. When we're stationary, because it's so well insulated, I'm hoping that the boat won't be melting snow that lands on top, and we should be able to avoid getting too much ice build-up when actually locked into the ice. Sorry, I think someone's just asked me a question a few times about licensing and stuff. You don't need to license these boats at the moment. When they are decommissioned, they are outside of the SOLAS requirements. You're not allowed to use them as a lifeboat anymore. But apart from being insured on inland waters if you need to be, no, there's no need for licensing or even for insurance. No, sorry, I lie. You do need the SSR number in the UK, which is a small ships register, and that's very cheap and it's nice and easy. Yeah, when you're offshore, you're free to make your own mistakes, I suppose. Do I need an ice scraper for? Yes. I think that even if you are doing your very best to keep the top of the boat sub-zero when you're in Arctic conditions, there still will be some ice build-up. So yes, some plastic scrapers or something that won't damage the boat. Some scrapers to get the ice off will be a good idea. Right, so this is going to be the last opportunity for anyone who's been asking a question. I keep on missing it. Catching fish. Will I be sailing around the UK? No, I won't. I'll be probably sailing up the UK before heading over to Norway. Will I be fishing? I'm not a very good fisherman. If someone on my team is a good fisherman, then maybe we can do some fishing, but I'm not an expert. I know how to fish through the ice. I learned from Inuit up in Greenland a few years ago, but no. I don't really fish. Navigation system at the moment, an iPhone and someone looking out of the front window. No, all the electrics will be going in, and all the area that's sort of around here and then around there, that's all earmarked for nav and communications. That will happen. Fishing on Alan sounds like fun, indeed. What sort of science stuff will I be doing with Alan? The original plan was to be doing a whole multi-week transect of sea ice, looking at microplastics in both the snow and in the ice, and also in the water below. So we were going to be doing a lot of that before the long ski journey. But unfortunately, that sort of plan went with the expedition that Alan was originally planned for. But I've got all the relationships still with the universities and with the institutes. So hopefully, when Alan goes north or south, we can fire that up and get some value, because Alan needs to earn his keep at some point and actually do something useful, and not just costing me money. Any more questions that have passed me by that you could ask again? Otherwise, I will probably bring this to a close. Am I going to fit AIS? Yeah, so I think I quickly mentioned this at the beginning. One of the very kind audience members actually donated an AIS unit for Alan back a few months ago, and so that's currently being stored, and it will be installed pretty much where my phone is now, so that we can ping out our location and not get run down by a huge oil tanker. Because if we go up north, particularly north of Scandinavia, that's now the start of the Northern Sea route. I guess you could call it the Northeast Passage, so the Russian Sea route. And there's now much more shipping on that than there used to be, and so you want to avoid getting run down. I think that question was about an induction stove in the bit with solar. No, we'll be using diesel for heating and for cooking. Cool. I think before the questions turn to abuse, I am going to run and hide. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Obviously, this will be posted on the group, on the channel, so that anyone can watch it later on. Hopefully, my answers will actually coincide with the questions coming up on the screen. I'll answer this one quickly before I go. Have I thought about shipping Alan closer to the Arctic and then just going under his own steam the rest of the way? Yes, I've been looking at quotes to getting Alan up to Tromsø in Norway. I think the cost will, because you have to go all the way south around and back up again, it'll probably cost more money, and it'd be good to get Alan along the Norwegian coast as a bit of a proving ground. The original plan was actually to go from Canada, and that was going to involve a huge amount of sea freight. And also going across Canada, it was going to be like a 10,000 kilometre road journey on the back of a truck too. So that was going to be a big one. Anyway, that's not happening now, so it'll probably be via Scandinavia. Right, I'm not going to answer any more questions now. If you have any more, stick them in the comments, or stick them in the comments of any of my other episodes. And I think that's probably it from me. Do the whole book buying, and merch. I think I've not got merch on under here, but there are these, buy these. And otherwise, thank you for supporting Alan doing his craziness, because otherwise I simply wouldn't be able to do it. Cheers all.